Hi guys, we are here to do the collectors again for chapter 11, and this chapter is called We Will Come For You. 3 minutes after midnight, Van's window inched open. Van, who was fast asleep with his hearing aids in their usual spot on the bedside table, didn't hear the window crack. He didn't hear the click of talons on his bedpost. He didn't hear the thunk of a heavy metal hook catching over the windowsill. A gust of cool air washed through the open window, fluttering the ends of Van's hair. Van stirred slightly, but he didn't wake up. 2 pairs of booted feet climbed up the brick wall beneath his window. 2 long, dark coats rustled over the windowsill. Van didn't hear this either. It wasn't until a shadow fell over him, blocking his nightlight's misty glow, that Van's eyelids finally slid open. 2 dark-coated men loomed over his bed. One had a live raccoon draped around his collar. The other had a hard face, glittering eyes, and a huge black raven on his shoulder. Before Van could scream, Jack's big hand clamped over his mouth. Jack's lips moved. The other man nodded, whipping back the covers. Van didn't even have time to wish that these two hadn't seen him in his model train pajamas before he was thrown over Jack's shoulder. Someone tugged a black cotton bag over Van's head. Van felt the jostle of being lifted over the windowsill, the rush of damp night air through his pajamas, the jut of Jack's shoulder in the middle of his stomach. He tried to scream, but the bag seemed to trap the sound inside his own head, where he could barely hear himself. For an instant, he thought he was falling. And then another pair of hands caught him, and Van felt like he was being hefted into a narrow, springy seat. Someone sat down beside him. A moment later, a jerk made Van sway back. A breeze told him he was moving forward, fast. They must know about the bottle, Van realized. Then they knew had stolen it. His body went cold. Please, he gasped through the black bag. I'll give it back. I'll do whatever you. The big hand clamped over his mouth again. If anyone answered, Van couldn't hear. With Van's breath and sweat and that big, heavy hand sealing the air inside, it didn't take long for the bag to grow stuffy. Soon it was stifling, very slowly. Trying not to panic, Van let his head droop sideways. The hand stayed where it was, and at last the bag had twisted just enough so that Van could peek past its bottom edge. He was seated in a small open carriage. It had black leather seats and large spidery wheels. 2 men on bicycles pulled it along, their dark coats flaring behind them. The carriage turned into an alley, and then into another alley, and then another. Soon Van had lost track of their path. He supposed it didn't matter. He already knew where they were going. At last the carriage rolled to a stop. Van was hoisted over Jack's shoulder again, and the bag slid back down over his eyes. He felt the dim closure of the empty office, and the chilling of the air as they all climbed down the steep stone staircase. Please, he begged, I'll do whatever you want, please. The body carrying his, didn't even pause. More turns, more stairs, down, left, right. Then, with dizzying speed, he was set on his feet. Hands shoved him backward. Van staggered onto a cold metal surface that vibrated and swayed beneath his bare toes. Someone wrenched the bag off. Van blinked, woozy and lightheaded, and found himself staring down into the bottomless, waiting dark. He let out a shriek. Without his hearing aids, the sound was muffled and dim, even inside his own head. Could anyone else hear it at all? He stood in some kind of swaying elevator, or really, Van realized, in some kind of hanging cage. Its walls were grates of wide-spaced metal bars, just inches beyond his toes. One side of the cage hung open, revealing the plummeting depths below. Standing on a solid stone platform a few feet away were Jack and 2 other hard-faced men. Jack's hands were clamped around the handle that spoked from a large metal wheel. The wheel led to a pulley and a set of cogs and cords. Van saw it all in a flash. They were going to lower him into the darkness, into that deep, blinding black, along with whatever monstrous thing that had made that stone-shaking roar, into the hold. No, he screamed. Don't, please, I'll give it back. Jack's mouth moved. He stopped, waiting. I can't hear you, Van shouted. Jack's lips moved again. Van couldn't make out a single word. One of the other men said something into Jack's ear, and Jack's eyes narrowed. The raven on his shoulder lifted into the air. Lies! Van heard the birds cry. Lies! Jack cranked the handle. The cage plunged. It halted a few feet down, swaying wildly. Van skidded on the metal floor, grabbing the edge of the open wall so hard that he thought his bones might snap. Please, he shouted. Please, he shouted towards the men on the platform above. I don't know what you want. The man in the ponytail shook his head. The third man muttered something, and Jack's eyes were like flint. He watched Van, waiting. Then he cranked the handle again. Van lost his footing. He fell onto his backside, sliding across the metal box to one of the far corners. His spine slammed against the bars. He stared up at the three men at the platform, at the green gold light that was already starting to dwindle away. His body seared with terror. No, he screamed. Somebody help, please. Something flashed above him, something with pearly wings. It soared across the darkness of the pit, skimming past the metal box with Van trembling inside. The pigeon landed gracefully on the handle, right between Jack's clenching hands. A second later, a woman in a long, dark coat rushed onto the platform. The pigeon flapped from the handle up to her shoulder. Van recognized the sleek-haired woman from the crowd that had surrounded him in the calendar. Sesame. She was shorter than Jack, but when she stood chest to chest with him, Jack could have sworn he saw Jack flinch. The woman whipped around, gesturing with the swinging metal box, and Van cowering in it. Her face was irate. What? Relieve. This, she shouted. Dare. Who? Own. The floor beneath Van gave another shudder. The box rocked. Van pressed himself to the wall, bracing for another drop. But instead the cage began to rise, swinging slowly back toward the platform. Hands grabbed him once more, and Van was too overwhelmed to do anything but flop over like a sack of wet sand. He barely noticed who caught him or who carried him away or where they were going, but suddenly they were stepping inside another room, a smaller stone-walled room with a blazing fireplace and scattered rugs, and towering Nail with his rats were there, along with sleek-haired woman and Jack and his men, and everyone looked absolutely furious. Someone plunked Van down in a worn armchair. The adults were yelling, Sesame. Sesame, nose to nose with Jack, Nail, and the other men right behind him. The noise made an ugly music inside Van's head. Every now and then, a word seeped through. Betrayed. Here. Only. No. But Van was too shaken and exhausted to even try to follow. He stared down at the floor instead. Firelight made the stones look damp and blurry. Strange shadows scuttled at the corners of his eyes. Maybe he was dreaming. Maybe that gentle touch on his ankle was his mother's sitting on the edge of the bed, waking him up. Van blinked. Two big rats were climbing up his pajama legs. Van froze. The rats scurried over his torso, up his arms, and came to rest on either side of his neck. The tips of their pointy fingernails needled his shoulders. Whiskers tickled his skin. Wet noses bumped lightly at his earlobes. Ew! Van shuddered and squeezed his eyes shut tight. But then, with the other voices fading into darkness, Van realized that the tickle on his skin wasn't just whiskers. It was voices. High, tiny voices, like the tick of a watch tucked deep in the pocket, and even without his hearing aids, he could hear every word they said. A collector, the voice said on the right. Collecting what? Asked the voice on his left. Little things, said the first, slightly higher voice, in half a little room. Ah, little room with red curtains? Van took a shaky breath. You mean my maquette? He whispered in a voice that was almost as soft as the rat's. Both rats froze. It's a miniature stage, Van went on, with curtains. Ah, said both rats. They went quiet for a moment, patting at him with their paws. Are you reading my mind? Van asked. Can't read, said the first rat. Are rats? Explained the other. No, I mean, can you tell what I'm thinking? How did you know about my collection? Lemuel saw, said the lower voiced rat. Seraphina saw. I don't know anyone named Lemuel or Seraphina. Lemuel Raven, said the rat, and Spider Seraphina. They've been watching me? Are watching you. Radoslav, warned the higher voiced rat. You say secrets. Stupid secrets, said Radoslav. He is not a liar, Violetta. Yes, smells true, said Violetta, sniffing Van's earlobes. Seems true. Violetta, Radoslav, ventured Van. He nodded toward the arguing adults. What are they going to do to me? Don't know, said Radoslav. Something, said Violetta. Van swallowed the knot in his throat. Are they going to hurt me? No, said Radoslav. Just keep you. Keep me, Van squeaked. Maybe, said Radoslav. Maybe forever, maybe not. Where is your machine? Violetta asked. My machine? Little blue machine. Oh, my hearing aids. They're at home, so I can't hear what the grown-ups are saying about me. Both rats froze again. Then Violetta jumped down and scurried across the floor to the hem of Nail's coat. Van watched her clamber up and speak into his ear. Nail's face shifted. A second later, Nail's tall, dark shape strode between Van and the firelight, blanketing him with shadow. Van Morkson, said Nail. He crouched in front of Van so that they were eye to eye. The other rat leapt from Van's shoulder back to his. If I am close to you, can you understand me? It helps if I can see your face, said Van, and if the rest of the room is really quiet. Nail aimed a glance at the others. It will be. He faced Van again. Firelight fell over his features, making his cheekbones even sharper than usual. We know what you have done, he said slowly. The blue glass bottle. Van's stomach was a whirlpool. His head was a bomb. He glanced over his shoulder and he found Jack and his men glaring back at him. There was no escape. I didn't, but Nail cut him off. We know where you've gone, who you've seen. Van's mind scrambled. The baby robin? Do robins work for you too? Because I was just not a match, one of Jack's men interrupted. Not a match. Knows too much? Weak and rusty, growled Jack. We can't trust him. Nail stopped Jack with a raised hand. Heavy. Anyone about us? No, Van squeaked. I haven't told anyone anything. I swear. Scared, said Violetta's clear little voice. And a little guilty, added Radoslav, but not lying. Yes, see, said Van gratefully. See, I'm not lying. Everyone froze. Something that wasn't actually a smile pulled at the edge of Nail's mouth. The room had gone so still that his words seemed to echo off the hills. Who are you talking to, Van Markson? Van stared back at Nail, petrified. Say you know what we collect, Violetta whispered. I know what you collect, said Van desperately. I know about the wishes. The chamber had been still before. Now it was so silent, so breathless, the entire room might have been sealed inside a twinkling glass bottle. Van realized too late that this was a test and that he had just passed or failed. For a long, cold, quiet minute, everyone stared at him. So he knows, said Nail in that deep voice that seemed to draw everyone in. He hears the creatures and he knows. There was another quiet minute. Van struggled to breathe. His lungs felt like two shriveled prunes wedged up against his thundering heart. Might it not be in our best interest, Nail went on at last, to have someone like him, someone able to be seen without being noticed on our side? The collectors looked at one another. Then they started speaking all at once, trading words that Van couldn't catch. He shrank into the armchair, watching closely as everyone gathered around a broad wooden desk. Nail scrawled something with paper and pen, and the crowd dispersed, and Nail glided slowly back toward the spot where Van sat. May be wrong to trust you, said Nail, bending down again so Van could see his sharp, stony face. Up to you to show us. Prove that you are not our enemy. His voice grew deeper. Or we will have to treat you like one. Yes, said Van desperately. I will. I'll prove it. Of course, he had no idea how he was going to prove this, but at the moment he would have promised to do almost anything if it would get him out of this underground room full of strange, angry people. Nail had held the folded paper out to Van, written instructions so there can be no misunderstanding. He gave Van such a long, sharp look that Van suddenly knew just how it would feel to be a peeled potato. Then Nail turned to the three burly men. Take him home. Jack was already at Van's side. Rivet, Beetle, Van thought he heard him say. Let's go. Before Van could even begin to unfold the paper, the men had dragged him away from the firelight, through the heavy door along the stone corridor, and back up the steep stairs to the City Collection Agency office. The flock of ravens came with them, letting out caws that sounded like the laugh someone gives when they don't think a joke is funny at all. Jack sat next to Van in the carriage, and the other men climbed back onto the bicycles, and they whooshed off through the twisting alleys. Jack didn't speak. When Van ventured a glance his way, Jack was staring straight ahead, his black eyes glittering like tar paper. Beyond the carriage's black hood, the sky was fuzzy and gray, deep gray, torn by one jagged hole of moonlight. The raven's wings flashed. The carriage whipped around the corner, and for an instant Jack thought he spotted Mr. Fallborg's grand white house with one light glowing in an upstairs window. But then they turned again, and he was thrown back against the seat. He didn't manage to wriggle upright until they reached his own building. The man with the raccoon, Beetle, Van thought, threw the rope and hook, sending it straight through Van's open window. Jack sprang out of the carriage. Clawman. What? Said Van. Jack hooked one thumb towards his back. Climb on. Hesitantly, Van wrapped his arms around Jack's neck. Jack grabbed the rope and it began to climb. In seconds, they were dangled above the sidewalk, Van clinging tightly to Jack's back. In a few more seconds, they had reached Van's windowsill. Jack leaned through the opening. Van tumbled down onto the hardwood floor of his bedroom, breathing hard and feeling like his bones had been replaced by cooked spaghetti. Be dead, murmured Jack, pointing at the paper still wadded in Van's fist. Read that. Van nodded. Giving Van one more glare, Jack slipped back over the sill and dropped out of sight. Van staggered to his feet, and by the time he reached the window, the three dark-coated men and their strange carriage had melted away into the dark. Van closed and locked the window, even though this suddenly felt like closing a screen door to keep out a thunderstorm. He pulled the shades, he climbed into bed and yanked the blankets up to his chin. Then he reached for the switch of his bedside lamp. The paper Nail had handed him was thick and yellowish with ragged edges, and the writing on it was slanted and hard to read. With shaky hands, Van tipped the page sideways and leaned closer. You have met a collector of another kind. He may already have shown you some of his treasures, but there is one collection he keeps well hidden. You must get a close look at this collection. Learn what it contains. As proof that you have seen it and that you are indeed on our side, bring a piece of this collection back to us. If you fail to do this, we will know that you are not an ally after all, but an enemy." Van's chest squeezed. With shaking hands, he refolded the note. First, he tossed it to the foot of the bed, but he could still see it lying there, watching him. He slid off the mattress, grabbed the note again, and tucked it behind the black curtain at the back of the miniature stage. He placed Super Van in front of it to stand guard. A collector of another kind? There was only one person this could mean, and if ravens and pigeons and spiders and people in long dark coats had been watching Van in his own bedroom, they could certainly have been watching him as he trotted through the door of Mr. Fallberg's big white house. There is one collection he keeps well hidden, that dark red curtained room, the hidden black doors at the very back. That unsettling feeling in the pit of Van's stomach began to bubble up again. But Mr. Fallberg was so nice, and now Van was supposed to spy on him and steal his secrets and give them away. What if he didn't want to be the collector's ally? Then again, if kidnapping was what they did to someone they only might be a friend, what would they do to an enemy? That howl from deep underground echoed in Van's memory. What dark, hidden, horrible thing had he wandered into? Van launched himself back across the room. He dove underneath the covers, even with the blankets wrapped tight around him. It took him a long time before he could stop shivering, and an even longer time before he finally fell asleep. Okay, so that's kind of an interesting twist. So we will see about chapter 12 next time. Let's see.